who are the guys that you think are going into this with some juice, right? With like the ability to really show out at a combine and make some moves up the board.
I mean, this is Jalen Milroe's Super Bowl right here, isn't it? Like, if he wants to be the third quarterback off the board, he's got to show out here.
Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone, an Alabama football podcast. I am Matt Scalici, standing in this week for our regular host, Ben Flanagan, who is off doing something cool that we will talk about in a future episode of this podcast. But for now, you're stuck with me, the old producer, and we're going to be kind of taking stock of some goings on in the world of college football and the way that it might impact Alabama on today's show. And we're joined to do that by AL.com Alabama football beat writer Matt Stahl. Matt, welcome back to the show. How's the offseason treating you so far?
It's good, I'm about ready for spring football to start, but there's always basketball and stuff going on, so can find a way to stay busy.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an ever changing, ever tumultuous landscape in college football, right? The offseason is rarely a settled, peaceful time when it comes to covering college football, because it's really just the time of year where the power brokers have the time to get together and talk about how they're going to, for lack of a better term, how they're going to mess all this up again the next time. That's a little pessimistic of me to say, but there's no settlement in college football right now. We have not arrived at a status quo. It feels like everything is still very much up in the air and still being shifted and decided, and it just feels like everything's sort of built on sand right now. Is that am I crazy, or am I describing how it feels to you too?
No, absolutely. I was talking to somebody last year involved with the conference at SEC Media Days, and they were just saying like, yeah, it's like the off season used to be like a really peaceful time. You just go, maybe take a vacation, whatever. Now it's 9 months of existential dread. So it's, yeah, I don't like the off season like all that much at this point. I pretty much get done with the prior season and I'm about ready to kick the ball off again.
Yeah, I mean, it does help a little bit to have games to focus on. It makes everything a little bit more clear. But as of right now, there is kind of a central strain of discussion going on with regards to college football, and I want to get into that with you. So Ross Dellinger, a reporter for Yahoo Sports, had a big story this week about where things seem to be headed. And if you've been paying attention to college football, you know that part of what's going on right now is that the Big Ten and the SEC are having kind of their own private meetings that nobody else is invited to. And they're trying to decide what the future of the sport's going to look like, what the future of the playoff is going to look like. Seems pretty much guaranteed at this point that after 2025, the structure of the playoff is going to be very different. And it seems like the SEC and the Big Ten are basically saying, hey, we have enough power and influence that we're going to be the ones to decide what it looks like going forward. Um, does it seem to you that this is I mean, I know there's obviously a lot of reason for cynicism, but like, does it surprise you that everybody else is just sort of resigned to this, that there's not really like an uprising or anything among the other conferences? This is just everybody's like, yeah, I guess this is how it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, really, they should have. The other conferences wanted to do something about this. They should have like thought about that like 10, 15 years ago when the SEC like first
Right.
started like going on this path of it just means more and all of that. But I guess it surprises me a little bit, but I don't know. I think it just, I think it shows we're heading for a larger break within this sport to,
Yeah, sure.
something resembling a super league.
It certainly feels that way, and especially if you read more into Dellinger's story here, which talks about, I mean, there's a lot in here. We're not going to get into all of it, but one of the things mentioned is that the SEC and the Big Ten are talking about putting together a TV package. So this would be outside of what they, as we always read about these massive TV deals that the Big Ten has with Fox and NBC and all these various networks, with the one that the SEC has with Disney and ESPN. This would be an entirely separate TV package that the two would sort of work together and sell and share the revenue from, and it would involve a series of non-conference games between SEC and Big Ten schools. We don't know how many, we don't know the extent of that, but that would, first of all, be something new in the history of college football, especially in college football TV. But also, it could really have an impact on the way that these teams schedule going forward, because non-conference scheduling has always been a weird animal. People always sort of ask, how do these games get set up? They have to be done so far out in advance. This could kind of change how that works a little bit for these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's so many questions as to what that package would look like. Like, is it every team playing a Big Ten team every year? Because like if I'm buying a TV package, like, I want Alabama, LSU, Georgia playing, the money schools in the Big Ten. I do not want Mississippi State, Purdue or something. Like I don't want
Apologies
uh,
to Mississippi State and Purdue.
I don't apologize to anybody. Uh, those schools don't like they're not making the
No,
money
of
off
course,
of
of course.
TV. So
Yeah.
like but yeah, I mean, so in that's one thing they'll have to settle. Like, how extensive is this TV package? Is it just like trying to set some week one games up, like to go play out in Vegas or something? But I mean, the other thing is like, how hard are all of these games that all the schools have scheduled out for a decade to cancel? Like, I mean, Missouri went to UMass, like just because it was really, really hard to cancel some of these games. Like it's very costly sometimes to buy out football games. So, for Alabama, that's, what do you do about the West Virginia? What do you do about the Notre Dame games you have on the schedule? Like how feasible is this to do given how schools have attacked scheduling over the past several years?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also raises the question of, right, so part of this discussion is the SEC. If this deal went through, the SEC would have to move to 9 conference games to kind of even things out with the Big Ten. One thing that, Matt, that I think a lot of, certainly on the Alabama side, but a lot of SEC schools generally talked about coming out of this past year's playoff is, look, we playing 9 conference games. Uh, I think the incentive is a little bit off for the SEC to move in that direction, given the way the playoff currently works, because they're sort of looking at how everything went down this past year, and they say, look, our strength of schedule is already nuts with 8 conference games, plus we're all playing a Power 5 opponent, at least one Power 5 opponent every year. And we didn't get all the teams we thought we would get into the playoff. And the guys that did get in, maybe they got a little roughed up along the way. Maybe they were at a little bit of a disadvantage. And strength of schedule really didn't seem to have the weight in the playoff selection process that it maybe has had in the past. So I think that's a big question moving forward here. Is the SEC is going to have this pushback about schedule strength and how much weight it should carry in the process going forward, especially if they're going to have to move to a 9 conference game slate and play a Big Ten school every year.
First of all, I'm continuing to push back on the like strength of schedule kept SEC teams out of the playoff this year. Like it's not a strength of schedule issue when you lose to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Like
That's
that's
look.
it just we'll just throw that out
Let's
there
let's just say
initially.
let's just say that it had an overall impact on the team itself. I don't think that's so controversial to say.
And the other thing on that is if you want a ninth conference game for the SEC, like I think ESPN's going to have to come off of more money for this TV contract, right? Because like if you're the SEC and you're not getting any more money, and you like have to add a different. I don't think the like risk reward there is quite what you want, especially for all these schools that are probably like able to bring in some income from like Alabama scheduled these home and homes. I assume they'll make some like pretty decent money off of those. So like to me, the ultimate decider on going to nine or not is whether the TV networks are actually like gonna give them a raise a little bit here.
Yeah, money is never been at more of a premium than it is right now, obviously, in college football. Matt, the other aspect of this, and this is where we get a lot more nebulous, I would say. Um, the story talks about a desire to move to either 14 or 16 teams in the playoff going forward after this season. And it gets pretty specific about the SEC and the Big Ten and what they're proposing, which would be that those two conferences would get four teams in the playoff automatically, followed by the ACC and the Big 12 getting two automatic bids, and a G5 bid, and then three at larges. The the interesting part of that, Matt, is the way that people are speculating it could impact conference championship week, let's say. And the ideas, I mean, I think generally right now nobody knows, and so I should say a lot of this is more speculative than what we've been talking about so far. But some people have said, look, if it's going to come down to four automatic bids, does the the point of a conference championship now come down to, let's determine those four spots instead of just let's leave it to a committee, let's have rankings determine it. And so some people have said, hey, maybe there's more than one conference championship game, quote unquote. Maybe you have a series of games in championship week that will set up to determine who the top four teams are. Essentially, you win a bid and play your way into one of those four spots. That would certainly, I think, resolve the issue that a lot of people have wondered about with conference championships, where it doesn't necessarily make as much sense with the way that playoffs work now, but it's still a major revenue source, and the conference wouldn't want to see that go away. So maybe maybe the solution to that is let's do more of them.
Yeah, I mean that would be fun. It also gets to the point where it's like, how long are we extending this season? Like,
Yeah,
good night. Like, there's going to have to be some work done around this as to like, where do you put the portal window? Where do you put? Because I mean, you're beholden to the semester system to some extent. So yeah, there's logistical hurdles I think you'd have to clear if you were to do something like that. But it would be kind of fun. And it would very much add stakes to the thing, which I think is good. I mean, I think I've shared on here. I think the conference championship should be like the last games of the season, and the postseason should just end right there. But clearly, I'm just yelling in the wilderness about that at this point.
that's one of your most old man opinions, Matt.
It could be. It's, I don't need a national champion. Like, it's not the point of the sport to me. But yeah, that does sound like it could be a lot of
I
fun.
I don't
Good.
hate it, to be honest. And I look at generally I'm a little like you. I'm of the position of like anything that goes away from how college football worked in like 2008, I don't like it. But the idea of three games being played on conference championship weekend, right, where you have a 1 versus 2 for sort of seeding purposes and the traditional SEC championship, but then you've got like a 3 versus 6 and a 4 versus 5 game. And those are essentially play-in games for the playoff. I kind of love that. I kind of think that's cool. And it brings back what I think was really a problem this past season, which was a total lack of clarity in the conference championship race. I think that really hurt the experience in 2024 in the SEC. This, like, the fact that we got to the last week and there's still like 8 scenarios of different teams that can get into the SEC championship game. I don't really love that. I think doing something like this would actually clarify it a little bit more and make it a little bit it would bring back that juice of the divisional race, which I really enjoyed. I really thought that added some drama to the regular season in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could do some fun things with like game locations on that. Like, do you play one of these in Atlanta, one's in Dallas, one's, Nashville when they build the new stadium? Or like could you just play the championship game in Atlanta and then the others are like home stadium
Could
games?
be, yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun too. There I don't know that this is like a thing that will happen, but I don't know. It's fun to speculate about. There's certainly some interesting like theories.
It's one of the only new ideas that's come out of college football in recent years that I didn't hate. So I'm at least a little bit excited about it. All right, well that's all we'll do in terms of wild speculation this week on the future of college football, Matt. But there is something more immediate going on this week, which you will be covering in person, which is the NFL Combine, and there's going to be a lot for you to cover there. You're going to be a busy man. There's 9 Alabama players that will be participating at the NFL Combine. Uh, it's a significant time always for Alabama fans, but this one is a little bit atypical, I think, in terms of draft years for Alabama because as we know, Matt, this is a program that prides itself on how many guys it puts into the NFL, and particularly in the first round. They've had a player go in the first round every single NFL draft, going all the way back to 2009. 2008 was the last time Alabama did not have a first rounder, or sorry, yeah, did not have a first round pick, and then they've even had multiple first round picks, Matt, every year going back to 2016. So a lot of streaks on the line here and not a huge group that is currently being projected to go in the first round. Can you talk to me a little bit about who are the guys that if somebody goes in the first round for Alabama, who are the guys that are likely to go that first night?
It's the ones I've seen. Tyler Booker, one of them from playing guard, and then Jahad Campbell. Uh, the I mean, the ding against Booker is nothing. I don't think about his game. It's just like how do NFL teams value guards there? Like,
Right.
are you taking a guard in the first round? Which I mean, I could argue you could take any offensive lineman in the first round, and if it works out, you're in great shape. Uh, so there's him, and then Jahad Campbell, just I mean, known for being just absolute physical freak at linebacker. Yeah, I've seen him sort of graded mid late first as well. Although in my when I run those shockingly addictive PFF mock draft simulations, trying to fix the Tennessee Titans, he occasionally he slips into the second a good bit. So yeah, I think we'll just see how teams value, and obviously the combine's gonna play some role in that.
So Booker seems like a pretty safe bet. You think at this point to be a first round pick? I mean, as much as we can know anything right now, do you think the streak is safe for Alabama getting one player at least in the first round?
Yeah, I think a team would draft him. I don't know. This is sort of my least favorite time of year because I just don't pay attention to much of like NFL
Of
projections at
course,
all.
this is the
And then like
classic. Yeah, the classic
yeah,
college
then
football beat writer
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a running joke at the Senior Bowl is you could tell who watches college football for enjoyment and who describes it as tape. So it's one of those things where, like, the NFL world expects you to sort of like, oh yeah, I think Tyler Booker fits in perfectly with the Green
Right.
Bay Packers, whatever pick. And no, it's like I barely watch this. Like, so, but yes, from what I've heard, like it seems like he'll go in the first round, but yeah, that's just speculation by me.
In terms of some of the other guys who are probably day two hopefuls, right? Guys who are could be high round picks. Who are the guys that you think are going into this with some juice, right? With like the ability to really show out at a combine and make some moves up the board.
I mean, this is Jalen Milroe's Super Bowl right here, isn't it? Like, if he wants to be the third quarterback off the board, he's got to show out here. But I mean, we've said the whole time, like the combine is going to be like thing.
Right.
Like he's gonna show up, run like a 4-4, something like that. He's gonna throw the ball just out of the stadium, and I think every GM in the league to some extent will be like, "Oh, we can fix them. Like
Yeah.
these are all these problems. Like you can be solved by the Las Vegas Raiders." Uh, yeah, it's like the Cleveland Browns know how to develop a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. Like this, what could go wrong? So he's like 1A 1B on who can really show out at the combine.
Mhm.
I'm interested to see what Q Robinson does. He's coming off the injury that ended his season. So, but I mean, from talking to people and watching him, he sort of he was in a weird spot because he was always on the same team as like the dudes at edge for Alabama. So he
Mhm.
kind of got he was behind Dallas, and he was behind Chris Braswell was on the same team as him. So yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for Q to show out as well. Just maybe I guess he kind of slid through the cracks to some extent at Alabama
Sure.
just by virtue of being on some of those great teams.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to go a little bit more into Milrow here for a second because you're right. We have talked a lot about how good he could look in a combine setting in terms of the draft, right? What do you think if you're sort of managing Jalen Milrow's career, so to speak, and you want this guy to have success at the next level? What is kind of the ideal scenario for Jalen Milrow not necessarily a specific franchise, but like what's the situation you want to find yourself in?
It's probably somewhere like where, I mean, you hate to say where you can sit for a few years, but yeah, where you can sit for a few years, where there's going to be, just some folks you can learn from. And really, I mean, the answer is solid organizational structure where you're not going to have to learn three offenses in 3 years, and, where there might be like somebody ahead of you who maybe has a similar skill set. So the offense, when you get your chances, you can really make the thing work, stuff like that. I think it's more the intangible stuff of just like, where is their organizational stability? Uh, where is there a coach who's going to like have a plan for my development and not need me to be like, all right, let's get who was terrible last year. Let's get the Tennessee Titans back to their winning ways on day one. Good luck. Uh, so yeah, the the more winning the organization currently is for him, I think the better.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. And it also means you're less likely to have another guy drafted at your spot too. It's coming up and giving you competition probably.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right on that. Yeah, you don't want to get like Jimmy Clausen out of a job.
Right. So Matt, when you just as a beat writer, right? This is sort of a regular rite of passage for AL.com. Alabama beat writers, they make the annual journey to the combine in Indianapolis, and there's always a lot to do up there. What do you focus on? What are the stories that you're after, and what are sort of the opportunities for you there to see and talk to people and get good stories out of this situation?
I think the big one is we'll get a bunch of Alabama players who are like unburdened from the Alabama kind of media machine around it, to where like maybe these guys will actually, want to talk a little bit. But beyond that, I mean, you can sort of work in the stuff. Like there's always guys who've played against Alabama. I mean,
Hmm.
this year there's some guys who beat Alabama
Sure.
in the combine. So I'll sort of look to get some interesting stuff from them. And then obviously, I'm sure who ran the 40 fastest story people will read.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your coverage from up there, Matt. And obviously, I'm sure that you will be having your requisite shrimp cocktail meal while you're up there, as is required by law for all sports writers.
Oh yeah, the finest shrimp in Indiana. Can't wait! Can't wait to eat delicious shrimp in Indiana. That seems like a great idea.
Well, regardless, you can find all of Matt Stahl's coverage of the NFL Combine this week and all of his coverage of Alabama sports generally over at AL.com. I am Matt Scalici filling in for Ben Flanagan, and you can listen to Beat Everyone and subscribe to Beat Everyone on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to you guys for listening, and we will see you guys again later this week for another episode of Beat Everyone. Thanks.